Islamic terrorism. It will be eradicated, believe me.
North Korea's missile launch yesterday went further than any previous missile launch fired by Kim Jong-un's regime.
We've been kicking the can down the road, and we're out of road. There is a military option.
There's this 11-year-old boy. All he wanted to do was mow the White House lawn.
This is Frank. He's going to be very famous. He's going to be a Navy SEAL someday. Maybe he'll be president.
Welcome to Fox and Friends Weekend. We do begin with a Fox News alert this morning. British police making an arrest in connection with the London subway attack, the terror attack there.
This as ISIS claims responsibility for the explosion that injured more than 24 people.
Ellison Barber live for us in Washington, D.C., with the very latest details. Ellison, good morning.
That's right. An 18-year-old is now in police custody, tied in some way to Friday's early morning bombing that left, as you said, dozens of subway commuters injured. British police say the investigation is ongoing, but this arrest is, quote, significant. According to the Associated Press, the 18-year-old man is being held for questioning under the Terrorism Act. He has not been charged or identified. He was arrested in Dover. That's a coastal town in England. It's a major port for ferries heading over to France. Police will reportedly transfer the man to a London police station and question him there. As for the terror threat, it remains at critical, meaning another attack could happen any day. Todd, Abby, Pete.
All right, Ellison live for us. Thank you so much, Ellison. Well, the president doubled down on this yesterday. I mean, he was tweeting out yesterday morning when we were on the air. He was saying we've got to get tougher. He said we've got to get nasty. Here he was a little bit later on in the day. We don't have that, Sod, but he reiterated it yesterday at the White House, saying we've got to get tougher. We've got to be proactive. I mean, this is not going to end anytime soon.
And I love the president's instincts on these attacks. He understands we can step back and say, oh, you know, or our prayers and sympathies go out. Of course they do in these instances. Right. Or we can get tougher and realize we are in a civilizational and generational battle against radical Islamic terrorism. And he also tweeted this. He said the travel ban in the U.S., which was recently reinstated, should be far larger, tougher, and more specific. But stupidly, that would not be politically correct. This is a guy who understands when you have an enemy at your doorstep or that has invaded you in the aspect of London, which has been overtaken by Islamists, thousands under regular monitoring from their intelligence services. Either you crack down on it or you suffer these types of things. The 5th terror attack in the UK just this year, they're lucky, thank God, that the bomb didn't actually explode. It was just the detonator that went off. That explosion is what injured people. The actual main explosive did not go off.
And it happened above ground, so it could have been worse, even though there were a number of lives that will never be the same. People that are injured with burns all over their bodies and faces. I mean, it's heartbreaking just what happened yesterday, but it could have been worse. And this is the new reality we face. I mean, you mentioned the political correctness and how the president he doesn't care about that. He always says how he feels. We had James Mitchell on the show yesterday, who's a bomb expert, who's about as tough as you can get. And he was praising the rhetoric coming from the White House. He says, you know what, this is a time where you want to feel emotion, where you want the president to be angry, where you want him to say we need to be nasty. Right. Because this is what we haven't done in recent years, and we've got to get to that place.
And I love Pete's point. Thoughts and prayers, I mean, at this point, everybody just says it, puts it on Twitter. It's empty. It doesn't have any oomph. President Trump has given a little oomph to this situation.
You know what's nasty? Is a bomb in a train. Yeah. It's time for us to give back to them what they deserve. Bombing innocent civilians on a train, I mean, it's about time. So thank goodness for the way.
Well, we have Nigel Farage on the show at about 9:20 this morning. I'm sorry, did I just say 9:20? You know what? For the first time I can do this. I'm going to blame pregnancy on that. 7:20 this morning. I'm sorry. Nigel Farage.
Hey, tune into Fox and Friends for the upcoming weekend so you can watch Pregnancy Brain happen live on the air.
But we're excited to have him on because he's no doubt going to have perspective on that.
All right, but we're moving on now to another Fox News alert. An American flag in flames and police under attack. A former officer's acquittal sparking violence in St. Louis.
32 protesters are now under arrest and at least 10 police officers have been injured. We're getting a better look at the destruction done throughout the city overnight.
Griff Jenkins live for us outside the city's public library with the very latest. Griff, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. That's right. We're just outside the public library. You can see the windows smashed here. There's actually a gentleman in there cleaning this up already. But let me tell you, it was quite a night with violence back in the streets here in St. Louis. Take a look at this video. thousands of protesters taken to the streets confronting the police, stomping on police cruisers, trying to agitate them in any way possible. This is a familiar scene, unfortunately, now in American cities, certainly 3 years ago in Ferguson, but they were burning American flags. There were, as you mentioned, 10 police officers injured. 9 were St. Louis cops. 1 was a highway patrolman because they were throwing bricks at the officers. And it started as a peaceful thing shortly after the acquittal of police officer Jason Stockley, accused in the 2011 murder of Mr. Anthony Lamar Smith. But it obviously turned into something different late after it got dark. We talked to a gentleman this morning. He's a resident here, Daniel Gilliam. Here's what he had to say about what happened. Take a listen.
If you feel like there's a problem with what went on and the verdict, then you voice your opinion. I have no problem with that. But just to vandalize and tear up people's property, it's not going to solve anything.
And protesters posting all sorts of actions, at least 2 marches later today as we continue to move around, guys, and see the damage, the extent of the damage done here in St. Louis and the Central West End.
Hey,
guys.
Hey, Griff, quick question. Why in the world would anyone target the public library?
I don't know. We looked to see if they took any books. They didn't. They spray painted SMS. Not sure exactly what that stands for. I don't believe it's a form of communication, but we're just having a look here. And, that gentleman we talked to also said, hey, what started out peaceful was a different crowd than he saw running through these streets last night. He thought they were really that element we saw in Ferguson 3 years ago that came with intent to cause destruction. So hopefully that won't keep developing here.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Griff.
So the rioters don't want to learn to read more. Interesting, Pete.
Apparently not. No. Public library seems like the perfect place to go to respond to this. Well, Dana Loesch was on our network last night and had a very clear message to those that see muddy waters in this particular instance of what happened in St. Louis. Take a listen to what she had to say.
Ultimately, the bottom line, Sean, is this. If using a vehicle to mow down police officers, that is assault with a deadly weapon. When you're charging at officers, that's assault with a deadly weapon. You do not have the freedom to mow down officers with your vehicle. As a St. Louis native, this is the same stuff that we heard with the Mike Brown case, when everyone said hands up, don't shoot. But yet the jurors, the individuals, the witnesses that were selected from Ferguson, from that community, Mike Brown's community, those witnesses said that never actually happened. That whole lie was able to go around the world. And I'm so tired of this happening. You have video evidence. Don't run down cops and you won't get shot. Police lives matter too, period.
Ooh, yeah, I was watching that last night, and she made a lot of strong points in that moment, but just her passion behind it, because, as we've seen on with the riots, I mean, there are a lot of emotions involved in these things, and you're talking about Black Lives Matter, you're talking about cops, and it's just a very tough situation. I think she goes back to the heart of this, and you mentioned this too, Todd, that facts matter, that what you see on these videos, that is what matters. So if we really want to have these riots and protests, let's focus on that. What are you protesting? What are you rioting?
Facts don't care about your emotions. That is, at the end of the day, juries and judges and others look at what actually happened. And that's why Dana Loesch and others are so fired up about this. Hands up, don't shoot, protests in the street, bricks through windows, none of it matters at all. What matters is what actually happened between a citizen who is a suspect and an armed police officer who upholds law and order in our country, does a deadly job every single day, makes tough calls at a moment's notice, and makes a decision. And unfortunately, in this instance, a life was lost. But through a process called due process, and our criminal, as you know about, Todd, they reviewed it, looked at the case, and decided, listen, it was complicated. He's exonerated. Doesn't mean everything was perfect, everything was done perfectly, but it doesn't mean that somehow there's a white privileged class stacked against a group of people, yet that's what protesters want it to look like.
To both of those points, people are mystified by lawyers. They think, oh my God, you learn how to be a lawyer in law school. You do not learn how to be a lawyer in law school. In law school, you know what you learn? You learn how to look at one issue through multiple sides, and you are able to make decisions based upon that. That's what the law is. It's facts. It is what the current state of the jurisprudence is, and making decisions based upon that. I almost think everybody in America needs to have a law class so they can understand that.
That's a great point.
That point.
Point taken, but I think we need less lawyers in the world.
I don't disagree with that. No, I don't disagree with that. But I think everybody needs to get
lawyers are behind every rock, suing everybody for everything, cracking the sidewalk, the lawyer class in half, the world would be in
But I do think there's something to people getting a better handling and understanding of the issues that we talk about before you throw yourself on the streets, throwing bricks in windows, hurting police officers. I mean, I just think that we all need to, as Lawrence Jones said, take a step back, try to gain a better handling of situations.
And I could get on board with your law class if it's a constitutional law.
100%. Yeah.
There we go.
100%.
We're going to leave. Great. We can agree on that.
We agree.
All right. I do want to bring you some other headlines this morning, starting with North Korea, who claims to have conducted yet another ballistic missile test. The rogue nation releasing new photos of the launch. You can see there the rocket, the same model that was launched over Japan on Friday. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley issuing a warning to North Korea as tensions boil over.
And at that point, there's not a whole lot the Security Council is going to be able to do from here when you've cut 90% of the trade and 30% of the oil. So having said that, I have no problem kicking it to General Mattis because I think he has plenty of options.
I don't think any of us have a problem with that. Well, the missile on Friday traveled over 2,300 miles before landing in the Pacific Ocean. Also overnight, California now one step closer to becoming a sanctuary state. The state Senate voting overnight to pass that measure. It would expand protections for people living in the country illegally when they come into contact with law enforcement. Well, the bill now heads to the governor's office, Jerry Brown's desk, who announced his support earlier this week. And Raul Castro denying any responsibility in the mysterious sonic attacks on American diplomats in Cuba. The Cuban leader saying he is equally as baffled and concerned by the claims. American diplomats reported the health attacks have caused hearing loss and speech problems for at least 21 victims. The U.S. is still investigating what caused those attacks and who is responsible.
I'm sure he's losing sleep over.
Yeah. Raul's empathy is appreciated.
Well, President Trump makes an 11-year-old's dream of mowing the White House lawn come true. Frank Giacchio wrote a letter to the president last month asking for the business opportunity. President Trump surprising him as he helped the grounds crew cut the rose garden grass. Watch this.
This is Frank. He's going to be very famous. Going to be a Navy SEAL someday. He's going to do great things for our country.
And guess what? Frank is going to join us later this morning on Fox and Friends at 8:50 a.m. to tell us all about his dream coming true. I can't wait to talk to him.
He normally charges $8, but he said it's free for you, Mr.
For
President.
the experience.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
so awesome.
All right, coming up, he was supposed to be giving out life-saving information to people fleeing Hurricane Irma, but his sign language interpreter is accused of being a phony.
There have been some interesting ones. Plus, as President Trump deals with Democrats on immigration, what should he demand as part of any DACA deal? Should it be the wall? Steve Cortez is here to discuss.
Back 16 minutes after the hour now, President Trump trying to work with Democrats, but he says the wall is a must.
We're working on a deal for DACA, but a lot has to do with the amount of security. We want very heavy security at the border. We want surveillance. We want a lot of things at the border. And ultimately, we don't want them to obstruct with the wall.
To discuss is Fox News contributor and former member of the Trump Hispanic Advisory Council, Steve Cortez. Steve, good to have you with us.
Thanks. Good morning.
So where do you see this going? Because, in any deal, Democrats are going to have to give a little bit. President Trump's going to have to give a little bit. Where does it end?
Right. Well, Abby, I think that a lot of people, and I've been advising, when this deal was or supposed, my email and my phone blew up with a lot of Trump supporters, a lot of my fellow colleagues on the Trump train, very worried that the president had given away the farm, that he was going to give DACA away for nothing in return. I don't think that's the case. I think, first of all, I think we need to calm down, take a deep breath, and realize that what the president's doing is negotiating. He has to negotiate with the Democrats, and I think the main reason, unfortunately, is that Republican leadership, on the Hill, we simply can't count on to get things done. We know that from health care. So when it comes to immigration, I think we do have to reach across the aisle. But here's the thing. I think what will come out, and certainly this is my advice to the White House, is DACA people should be protected. I do believe that. I think they're a different category of illegal immigrant. They didn't choose to break our immigration laws. They were brought here when they were children. So I believe that is a separate and different category of people. However, if we're going to extend protection for them and do it the right way this time, not like Obama, do it through legislation, something should come back in return. And I believe that should be both funding for the border wall and the RAISE Act, moving towards skills-based immigration rather than chain migration, which we presently have.
Let's go to the base for a moment, Steve. I was out in Altoona, Pennsylvania yesterday talking to people, many members of his base, and they unequivocally support him on basically everything he's done so far, including reaching across the aisle to the Democrats. How long, though, do you think the base is going to stick with him?
Right. Listen, it's a great question. I think his support is incredibly sticky. I really do. And I think there's reason that the base trusts him and supports him, by the way. It's because he hasn't let us down so far. Look at the accomplishments already, only months into his presidency. The border is largely, to me, is amazing. We still need the wall. But just through better enforcement and through clear-eyed rhetoric, illegal crossings have plunged. Our economy is accelerating. Gorsuch is on the court. So there are major accomplishments already. There are reasons, I believe, why the base believes that they should trust Trump and why I continue to trust Trump. And he will negotiate with them. And at the end of the deal, he will come out with a package, I think, immigration reform package that is going to be pleasing to all Americans. It's going to put America first. It is going to protect the DACA people, but it's going to put the interests of the American workers first.
Yeah, and if he's successful at that, if he can get a deal done with Democrats, the ones that should be concerned are Republicans, many of them that are up for re-election in Congress. If anything, this should be a wake-up call. You got to start doing your job.
Yeah, Abby, I think you're so right. A lot of Republicans, particularly in the Senate, but a lot of Republicans on the Hill, they still have a 2015 mentality. They still haven't really caught up, woken up, I think, to what happened last year in this country. There was a tectonic shift in our election. There was a revolution at the ballot box. People are calling for massive change. They're sick and tired of a Washington crony establishment system that exists for its benefit to the detriment of the people. And too many Republicans are part of that problem.
Great point.
So I think what Trump has done masterfully lately is reach across the aisle and say, I don't always need you, Republican leadership. We're going to get deals done that benefit the American worker.
It could be a very smart tactic. Steve Cortes, good to see you.
Steve, thanks.
Thanks
All
so
right,
much.
a Fox News alert. Violent protests erupting in St. Louis overnight after a former police officer is cleared of murder charges. So do these protests do anything to improve the situation? Our panel here to discuss next.
And major news just ahead of the Christmas shopping season is Toys R Us about to file for bankruptcy.
Say it ain't so.
Say it ain't so. What's up next?
This program.
And we are back with some quick headlines. 2 executives are now out as fallout continues for Equifax after its massive security breach. The credit monitoring firm announcing its chief information officer and chief security officer are retiring. Well, this comes a week after security breach may have exposed personal data for up to 143 million Americans. Also, this morning, Facebook is enabling advertisers' abilities to pinpoint users interested in hate-filled content. The new restriction comes after the news organization's ProPublica claimed it paid to have its articles specifically promoted to users expressing interest in topics including Jew hater. It reportedly took Facebook 15 minutes to approve the targeted ads. Pete, over to you.
Thanks, Abby. Well, a Fox News alert, 10 officers injured as protesters clashed with police in St. Louis. Following the acquittal of a white police officer who was charged with first-degree murder after a 2011 shooting of a black man. But don't these protests just hurt the community, do they? Joining us now is Fox News contributor and the author of Blacklash, Deneen Borelli, and Army vet and former NYPD Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Joining us. Deneen, I'll start